your YouTube channel called?
It's called John Paoletti.
Hey, John Paoletters. We need that. I thought the biggest YouTube channel was that priest dude.
That priest dude. I said the biggest high school religion teacher channel. I don't know. All I know is that I've got over 100 subscribers. What can I say? I bully students into it. You are so desperate for bonus points that you don't need.
Are you serious?
The church is holy. And we identified that in a long lesson 1. Lesson 2, we talked about how that holiness is manifested in vocations, different kinds of vocations. It's a good lesson yesterday that a lot of you missed because you're so smart that you took the PSAT. You can find it on YouTube. That being said, lesson 3 today, the church is holy, and the church is basically going to say in the catechism quote today, look at her top members, very, very, very holy people. The church produces holiness because the church produces grace. And so we're going to look at real briefly why we venerate the saints, why they're important, but then we're going to walk through the canonization process is the majority of today's lesson. And how does a regular dude or gal become a canonized saint? Okay. By canonizing some of the faithful, i.e., by solemnly proclaiming that they practiced heroic virtue and lived in fidelity to God's grace, the church recognizes the power of the Spirit of holiness. So, 2 categories that kind of separate the saints is their heroic virtue, going above and beyond the call of duty. You got to be more than a Sunday Catholic to get canonized the saint, obviously. You got to be faithful to God's grace. You have to let that infiltrate every area of your life and really basically do great works or have great faith in his name and edify. So those are the 2 topics identified in the catechism here that make a saint a saint. Church recognizes the power of the Spirit of holiness within her and sustains the hope of believers by proposing the saints to them as, I should have bolded models and intercessors. Those are the 2 roles of the saints. So they're models, meaning that, yes, Jesus came and he told us how to live. Gave us the Beatitudes. He gave us the example of his death on the cross. All great stuff. Sometimes it can be hard to try to fit your life in 2022 into that high standard. The saints who have walked with us give us those connections on what it really means to live selflessly here in the 3rd millennium after Christ. So there are models showing us how we ought to live, and intercessors, meaning they pray on our behalf. There's a beautiful quote from St. Dominic, who founded the Dominicans. You probably could have guessed that. And as he's dying, his brothers are, of course, sad. This is, the founder of our community. And he told them, do not weep, for I shall be more useful to you after my death. And I shall help you then more effectively than during my life. Which shows the power of the saints that, our God is not a God of the dead, but of the living. So they go on to live, and they actually could get closer to us because they have more influence with their prayers to heaven. So they can help us more in heaven. That's what it means to be an intercessor. Saints are models and intercessors. And as most of you probably know, this is one thing that separates Catholics from Protestants. Protestants do not venerate the saints nearly to the degree that we do for these reasons. But it's something the Catholic Church does for reasons given in the Catechism. All right. Fidelity is faithfulness. So God gave them a grace and they remained faithful to it. in whatever capacity. Of course, every saint has their own story. Next class, you will probably get a virtual lesson because next time I see you is, of course, Monday. I do not expect to be at school on Monday due to the birth of my third child. So you're probably going to get a recorded lecture on Mary's role in the church, and then lesson 5 is going to be on Charlene Richard, local saint, Little Cajun Saint is her nickname, and that'll all be coming at you next week. And then mind map and test at the end of next week, perhaps. All right. All right. Correct. Warm fuzzies. So I did talk about that in the past 2 classes. Here's the thing. It fits beautifully into lesson 4, which you're not going to get today. So I actually record everything I wanted to say on YouTube. So your next virtual lesson will explain that. If I have time at the end of today's class, I will explain to it. Okay, so hold off on that. It's actually, I made it part of lesson 4 because it's so timely, because lesson 4 is about Mary. Here we go with our multi-step process. Steps to sainthood. Step right up to become a saint. That's pretty cheesy. All right. So the first step to move somebody to the altars to being declared a saint before the church is to have the local church compile basically their life story, evaluate it, recognize the heroic virtue and the fidelity to God's grace. They write a positio, a long book on everything they know about the person, basically, and they send it off to Rome. Once the bishop says, yep, this person is qualified to be called a saint, sends it to Rome. And when that bishop approves it and sends it to Rome, the person is officially a servant of God. Right now, you have servant of God, Augustin Pelifig. You have servant of God, Charlene Richard. You have servant of God, Father Verbis Lafleur. They're all on this stage. Local approval, sending the book to Rome, waiting on Rome to give us a thumbs up, at which point they are called venerable. The Vatican sends the thumbs up right back. Y'all were right. That dude was holy. That gal was holy. They can now universally be called venerable by the Universal Church. This person is to be venerated for their life of heroic virtue. They lived a very Jesus-esque life. If Jesus-esque was a word, that's what they would say. Christ-like life. Now, a lot of people, actually open your textbooks when you're done writing to page 139. 139. Sorry, Addison. Excuse me, pardon me, come through. Your textbook does a pretty good job of identifying all the different American saints who are in this stage. You're going to need one of those. Oh, I should take those back. Oh, by the way, girls, I handed out that retreat. That's obviously different from girls' retreat this weekend. This is a summer retreat. You're going to want more Jesus in the summer because you'll be so far from your beautiful Catholic high school. So go on that retreat. All right. Okay. You see on the top of page 139, American Servants of God. I honestly don't know the first one listed, Vincent McCauley. This is page 139. But I do know the second one, Servant of God, Patrick Payton. He was a pretty nationally known dude. He promoted the rosary and, more importantly, family prayer. He was famous. His famous slogan is, "The family that prays together stays together." And so he was trying to enhance the domestic church by getting parents to pray with their kids. Good cause. He stepped out of his comfort zone. He reached thousands upon thousands of people. He is servant of God. I don't know where he's from exactly, what diocese would be promoting him. Okay, at the further to the top, we have the Venerables, and I know two of them on the list. Venerable Michael McGivney, he founded the Knights of Columbus. Y'all are familiar with the Knights of Columbus because of that essay contest, right? Well, he founded them, and that institution has a big impact on the life of the church in America. He's up for beatification. He's venerable, meaning the Vatican has said, yes, this person lived heroic virtue. I also know Venerable Solanus Casey, a very holy priest in Detroit. He's more popular than most of them on that list. What is needed in order to go to the next step, which, as you see, is blessed? A miracle. So it can be a long waiting game, but we need a miracle. The Vatican needs a miracle in order to declare somebody a blessed. I know the first two blesseds on the list. Blessed Junipero Serra very much evangelized large portions of California, came up from Mexico, proclaiming the gospel, establishing churches. So there's a lot of Catholicism in the history of California, largely established by that man. And then you have Blessed Xavier Silos, who actually lived in New Orleans and took care of sick people in New Orleans and died serving the sick people. I might teach you more about him in a couple of chapters. He might be the saint of the chapter in a couple, but he's a blessed. So we've got one miracle approved for those two people, and therefore they are blessed. And why a miracle? Because the church can say, listen, we can look at somebody's life and assume that it was holy, but it's good to have some heavenly approval, right? Because we can never know everything about a person. So it's kind of the safe call to say we need a miracle from heaven to show us that this person truly was. There was no duplicity in them. They were authentically Christ-like and heroic in virtue. I'm going to come back to this slide, but I'm going to click on this link and it's going to describe to you the standards and expectations the Catholic Church has as in declaring a miracle, and you're going to find them, I believe, rather strenuous. All right, right here.
Some of those cases early on might not.
This is the Miracle Hunter.
It doesn't matter if you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. My name is Michael O'Neill, and I'm the Miracle Hunter. Thanks for joining us for another week of exploring the miraculous events from all around the world.
I want that job.
Canonizations have multiple stages. The very first opening of the cause is when somebody is said to be a servant of God. That's when all the paperwork is gathered to find out about the life of that potential saint. Then when they are established as somebody having lived a life of heroic sanctity, then they are said to be venerable. And after that, after the first miracle is found, blessed, they are beatified. And when a subsequent miracle is found, that is when they are elevated to the canons of the saints.
When the Congregation of the Saints beatifies or canonizes a soul, they have to show that they have gone above and beyond what an ordinary person would do.
When a saint has been said to have been interceding for a miracle, it shows that they are with God and they are working in order to help us on earth. Whenever the Catholic Church finds a miracle that can be used for canonization, it's sort of a miracle in and of itself because the criteria are so strict.
To be called a cure, the cure has to be, the condition has to be a lethal condition.
Now, what this doctor is about to describe to you is the 5 qualifications I want you to know for a miracle to be approved by the Vatican. So what we have here is the 5 conditions for a miracle to be approved and certified a miracle, if you will, by the Vatican. Number 1, he says, is lethal. aka deadly. It's got to be serious. You know, you sprain your ankle, you can't play in the game. You pray to blessed so and so for a miracle, and all of a sudden it feels better. Not going to qualify to be a Vatican approved miracle because it's not lethal. It's not serious enough, right? It's big fish only, Vatican says. All right.
The cure has to be instantaneous or relatively quick. It can't be a cure that happens over 2 years. Gradually, it has to be an instantaneous cure. It has to be lasting.
So the second one is instantaneous, meaning that you're praying for a cancer to leave your relative. Stage 4 cancer, it's everywhere. But you go to the doctor checkup a month later and they say, oh, it's regressing. And the next month, oh, it's regressing. Oh, it's because we're praying to blessed so-and-so. Well, that's great. And that could be a miracle in truth. Vatican's not going to approve it because it's to know that it's an act of God, it's got to be instantaneous. It's got to be voila, right there, night and day. In a moment, God does the complete healing. Number 3 is lasting. So you pray for the cancer to leave, and it does leave. Great. But as you tell the Vatican about it, and you try to get this miracle approved, the cancer comes back. It's not going to qualify to be a Vatican-approved miracle.
And complete. As I mentioned, we sometimes follow these cases for 3 or 4 decades before we even act on them.
So the fourth one is it's got to be a complete healing. So your stage 4 cancer goes back to a stage 1 cancer. That's great. Not grounds for a miracle because you still have some cancer. It's got to be total. You see, it's pretty high expectations for all this to happen. And the toughest one is the last one. And they're not going to put the words up there, but I'll tell you.
And the most difficult criteria of all is that there can be no medical treatment that relates to the cure. Because of this, only a small fraction of the reported miracles at Lourdes or in canonization causes are classified as medically inexplicable.
So there's got to be no medical treatment associated with the cure. No medical treatment. So you've got the cancer and you're praying to blessed so-and-so and you're getting chemo. I'm not an oncologist, but let's just make this up. And the cancer is gone. And you believe it was through prayers and a miracle. Well, the Vatican's going to say, well, you got chemo at the same time, so we don't know what did it. We won't be able to prove it, so you don't qualify. Doc gave you pills a month ago. Say these pills might take a while to kick in. You pray for a miracle. You think it's a miracle. It could be a miracle. But if you had pills for that were maybe just kicking in, the Vatican's going to say, you got medical treatment. We can't certify this to be a miracle. Yeah, Advil, maybe you're trying to manage some pain. Yeah, that would never, of course, cure cancer. So the Vatican might let that slide. Yeah.
Does the miracle have to be a medical one?
Give me an. Oh, okay. I see what you're going. Give me an example. Why do you ask that question?
Well, just because, I mean, the other miracles.
It's hard to come across non-medical miracles.
Like not people doing those miracles. That would be like Mary miracles and stuff.
Give me a.
Like all the Mary stories.
All the Mary stories. Okay. So here. Okay. So Mary appears at Fatima, makes the sun dance.
Yeah, that.
We already know Mary. Oh, so let me. We already know Mary's a saint in heaven, so we don't need a canonizer. One, it would not go towards the canonization of the visionaries Lucia, Jacinto, and Francesco. It would not go to theirs because they didn't perform it, or it didn't necessarily happen through them or their holiness, right? So, other Mary, speaks to Saint Bernadette at Lourdes. Hundreds of people are miraculously cured at Lourdes still today. Is that attributed to Saint Bernadette? No. Now, Saint Bernadette is canonized. She was not martyred. I'm going to get to the martyr exception really shortly. But Saint Bernadette would not get credit for those. It's got to be, I am praying specifically through this intercession, not through Mary, but through Bernadette. Well, since you ask it now, I'll tell you that martyrs do not need miracles at all. So, I'm not sure the details of their process, but if somebody is martyred, I don't even know, honestly. I'd have to ask my friend who's kind of an expert on this topic if they're even beatified. I think they'd be beatified, but they don't need a miracle. You see, in the early church, the only way to be labeled a saint was to be martyred. That was seen to be the greatest conformation to Jesus. You had to be martyred to be extra holy. Now that martyrdom isn't much popular after the year 300, the church starts these other standards. But martyrdom has always been understood to be like the climax moment and the greatest act of love and faith in God that you could have. So they don't need miracles. So they jumped the system. And answer your question, Ella?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I was making her a martyr. She didn't kill me.
All right. So you got the 5 categories that the church looks at to approve a miracle. And once you go through all those categories, and it takes years, and it takes a lot of money to pay all those doctors to examine all the medical criteria. Is there any way the church says that this person was healed naturally? And they have Catholic doctors, they've got Muslim doctors, they've got atheist doctors. If any of them say that I can explain this medically, this healing, the Vatican throws it out. But there's still hundreds every year that doctors are shrugging. There's no explanation. No explanation.
Okay, so chemotherapy takes like a while, right?
Sure.
If the miracle is like instantaneous, like
Yeah.
I don't know, like a month of chemo, like that wouldn't cure cancer and then you're just automatically cured. Would that still count as like a miracle?
It all depends on the timing, the expectation, the level of cancer that already existed, what the doctors would project or predict. I can't answer. Yeah, that's a case-by-case question.
Okay, so you know there's like steps to get to sainthood?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So is there steps to uncanonize a saint?
Well, that would be a sad day. I don't know if that ever happening in the history of the church.
Well, if they figure out, because like medical understanding changes. So if they figure out something that could have existed in one of the medical miracles, that counts as like reason to uncanonize it.
Okay, so the doctor actually said this in the video. He said that as technology improves and science improves, maybe miracles approved 100 years ago would not be approved today. But that's not going to make us uncanonize somebody because they're mainly canonized for the heroic virtue. The miracles are just heaven's confirmation. And at the time, with the science we had, the only explanation they were able to give was this is a divine miracle. That's it. So I know I've never heard of the church uncanonizing somebody, frankly. We do have evidence of certain saints performing sins, like I think of Saint Jerome, who used some feisty words with even other saints of his time. So there's salty saints, but we've never had to uncanonize them.
So I know that saints can be like, you can pray for their intercession. So like at the end of prayer, so go like Saint whoever.
Father Turling's, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, pray for us. Yeah.
So like whenever we do Father Turling's pray for us, he's gonna say,
Yeah.
Could you do like anyone you choose and ask them to pray for you after? Like,
Yeah. What?
For like the play, we'll do like Father Hampton pray for us.
But he's still alive.
Right.
So you have to text him.
So like my question is.
If they're still alive, they may not hear you say, Father Hampton, pray for us. So I told Gravesy to send Father Hampton Davis a text. You can figure it out. Yeah.
I see him.
All right. So, yeah, with Father Turling's, we in the Lafayette community recognize his heroic virtue, his great service. And so we like to think he's in heaven. We don't have evidence of that, but it's safe to pray, I think, if you have enough reasonable evidence. And why he doesn't have a cause open, I honestly don't know. It's got to be usually a group of individuals to pick it up and start it. And nobody has with Father Turling's. I don't know if maybe they have tried and it didn't go anywhere. So I can't really speak to that. Yeah. With all this free time on my hands. It's like a full-time job. All right. So, of course, to be a saint, you have to have 2 miracles. Unless, as I've already said, you were martyred. Now, Pope John Paul II stretched the definition of martyr. Of course, you know somebody that dies for the faith. Well, let me give you what happened, what he did to St. Maximilian Kolbe. St. Maximilian Kolbe, long story short, is a Catholic priest in Auschwitz concentration camp. Somebody runs away from a prisoner, escapes from Auschwitz. Nazis say because one or 2 people escaped, we're killing 10 of you to send a message. Nobody else do this. And they pick 10 random guys. One of them's a dad. Dad starts sobbing. Don't kill me. I've got, wife and kids. Maximilian Kolbe says, take me instead. And he steps up. And Nazis are alarmed, but they actually go with it. And Kolbe is going to be starved to death, and then eventually he actually lives for days, starved to death in a hot oven. And they eventually just inject him, and he dies. So Saint of Auschwitz is one of his titles. That being said, was he a martyr? Not traditionally. He didn't die out of, I believe in Jesus. He is what John Paul II called the martyr of charity. He had such love in his heart for his neighbor that he died because of his love. And so we have this new category in the church, a martyr of charity, can be canonized without miracles. John Paul II said, I'm Polish and I like this Polish saint, so I'm going to do this. And he can't because he's Pope. Now, this is why I think Father Verbis Lafleur is going to have the fastest track to getting canonized a saint, because he doesn't need miracles, from my understanding, because he died out of love for his neighbor. I think the church can skip the miracles needed. Now, right now they're rewriting canon law for the details on this process, but it's going to kind of fast track, I think, Father Verbis Lafleur. Nunco just died in a nursing home. Sorry, Nunco. He's going to need a couple miracles, but he can do it. All right. So that's what a saint is, of course. And there's one more title that you know from vocab that can be tacked on to extra special saints. Saints that have had like a permanent impact in the church, who have given us something that almost redefined the way we understood something about our faith. Those are doctors of the church. St. Thomas Aquinas, doctor of the church. St. Augustine, doctor of the church. St. Catherine of Siena, doctor of the church. St. Therese of Lisieux, doctor of the church. I might only be able to name 10 to 15 off the top of my head. But the popes have actually, in the past few years, named a few more. There's talk of St. Faustina, because she taught the church so much about God's mercy. Even in our present day and age, she could be a doctor of the church. So right now, I believe we have 35, maybe 36 doctors of the church.
So are the writers, like the people that wrote like the Gospels, well, obviously the apostles, and then other people that wrote other books in the Bible, are they considered doctors of the church?
No, the doctors are not the biblical saints. It's kind of like thereafter. So they get titles of apostles and evangelists. They get their titles, but they don't get entitled the doctor of the church. This is kind of like post-biblical times or biblical writings. St. Irenaeus, there's a lot of church fathers that fit this category. St. John Chrysostom, all these people you know so well. Right. All right, so that's doctor of the church. You know, martyrs and martyr of charity, exception to this rule. This is lesson 3. Lesson 4 is on YouTube, but I'm probably going to assign it to you on Monday when I'm not here. All right, we'll talk about the consecration of the Immaculate Heart of Mary right now. No more notes.